Hello, I'm Stacy Smith, and welcome to another edition of Around the Table, Politics 2020. This is where we discuss the political side of things and whatever else comes to our mind. Well, tonight, the GOP National Convention comes to an end with President Trump's acceptance speech. Last week, the Democratic National Convention was held. It's now in the record books, and that's our topic on Around the Table, Politics 2020. And I have a great group of analysts, as we always do, and we will begin with former Pennsylvania Governor, Republican Governor, Tom Corbett. Mr. Corbett also served as State Attorney General and also the U.S. Attorney for Western District of Pennsylvania. Also joining us is the former State Chairman for the Democratic Party of Pennsylvania, and that is Jim Byrne. Jim also served on Allegheny County Council and was Council Chairman, and also is now an attorney here in Pittsburgh. Speaking of attorneys and staying on the Democratic side, we find Amanda Green Hawkins. Amanda is the former National Committee woman for the state of Pennsylvania to the Democratic National Party. Amanda also served on the Allegheny County Council, and she's an attorney for a big union here in Pittsburgh. And finally, we introduce you to Keith Schmidt. Keith has been in politics since around 1980 or so and working on the Ronald Reagan campaign way back then. But his claim to fame here recently has been, of course, he was state director for former Republican Pennsylvania Senator Rick Santorum, and Keith also served on Rick Santorum's 2012 presidential campaign, if I'm not mistaken. I got the right year on that one, Keith. And Keith now has his own consulting firm. I want to thank all of you for being with us this morning and this afternoon on Around the Table. Let's go ahead and start with this. How important is the president's speech tonight? And I'm going to start with you, Jim.
I don't think it's important for his base. His folks are with him no matter what. There have been some Republicans peeling away from him for a variety of reasons. To the extent he needs to shore up folks who have started to wander away from him or the support has become soft, it may be important for them to hear something tonight that would reassure them that they need to stick with him. Whether or not he does that remains to be seen. I think most folks are in the camps, respectively. There's a small percentage of voters out there in this season, this 2020 presidential season, that could be undecided. He needs to appeal to them. He needs to appeal to the independent voter, not necessarily party affiliated. If he stays on the teleprompters and they write him a good speech and he doesn't deviate from it, and then an hour after the speech he's not attacking people on Twitter, it could be a decent night for him. But I don't know that it's going to really knock any margins or barometers significantly off course from where they are right now.
Governor, your thoughts?
Well, I agree with Jim. It's a pretty divided country right now. And when it comes to the presidential election, my feeling is there may be about 5, 6, 8% that would actually say they're undecided. And, at this point, I'm not sure why they're undecided, because this campaign, this presidential election has been going on since he was elected 4 years ago. It's never really stopped from either side. So in looking at who's out there to get their vote, you're not going to get their vote on a speech like that tonight. This is the cheerleader speech. This is get to your party, get them out. And you'll see many more on both sides trying to get people out when it comes time for the election in November. But I do think it's interesting to see the reactions of people, and that's what I'm going to be listening to. If they would interview people who haven't made up their mind. And so, Stacy, I'm looking to your news crew to go find those people and ask them, well, not who you're going to vote for, but why haven't you made up your mind at this point? Because I think that's a story.
That could be. Amanda, your thoughts?
I agree with everything that's been said. I think that for that small percentage of people who are undecided, this is going to be something that they're going to be looking at to decide who they'll vote for, comparing it to Biden, the Biden-Harris speeches last week. And something I know about Pennsylvania, and it may hold true for other states, is that people tend to be more interested in their local officials than in the Congress people and perhaps president, because you see a significant undervote when it comes to top of the tickets a lot of times. And so they're more concerned about what's happening where they live, work, and play, where the rubber meets the road. So he's really going to have to try to appeal to that margin, because we know it's that margin where they find those small numbers that can actually turn the tide in an election.
All right, Keith, I saved you for the last. Your thoughts?
Well, I will see if I'm right next week, but I have a feeling we're going to see a slightly different President Trump tonight. I think it's important that he looks very presidential tonight. I think he sees the increasing importance of the benefits of incumbency. And I think he has to use it to his advantage tonight. I think there's been a certain amount of pomp and circumstance and pageantry to the GOP convention this week. There is a sense that they are the party in power, and they're asking for you to give them another 4 years. But I think they've effectively used the trappings of incumbency in a way that shows that they are clearly in charge and have a vision for the future. I think he's going to squarely go after swing Democrats tonight. I think he's going to spend a significant amount of time on law and order, largely because it's an unfortunate timing for the Democrats, because I think the Republicans, and I think the governor would agree with me, that the Republicans have long been the law and order candidates. Right now, we're gonna seize that moment right now, because at a time when the Democratic slate and many Democrats across the board are calling for the defunding of police, people in the suburbs in middle America and those key electoral states are getting very, very concerned about their safety. So I think you're gonna hear a lot about that tonight. And I also think you're gonna hear about the economic recovery, because one thing is for sure: every day, every week, every month that this COVID pandemic continues, the pressure is building on both families and businesses. And they want to hear how we're going to get out of this and how we're going to stand up again. And I think he's going to give you some red meat tonight and tell you exactly what he's willing to do to stand the economy up again once we see ourselves through these challenging times.
Well, you bring up you brought up several interesting points. I want to stay on the COVID one for right now and ask for other people's opinions as well. You indicate that the people are going to be concerned about their livelihoods and how things are going for themselves. The Democrats in their convention, it seemed to me, took a lot of time to blame the president and his administration for not reacting quickly enough and doing enough about the COVID. Which way will this go with the voters, do you guys think? The Democratic?
Yeah, I right now, people are thinking in a time of crisis. The incumbency in the Republicans playing their incumbency as an attempt to claim high ground is definitely a two-edged sword in this climate. How many people are still out of work? How many people have lost a loved one? How many people have we lost? The economic ripple effect that has had for them to try to say things are going to get better and this is our plan once we get past COVID. The Democrats are going to pivot right around like they did at their convention and simply state, if it had not been for your reluctance or unwillingness to accept the reality of the inevitable pandemic, we wouldn't be in this problem. So you're asking for 4 more years to get us out of a mess that, quite frankly, you created. So it's really going to be dangerous for them to go down that road and try to talk about this is how we're going to fix it, when the Democrats will turn around and simply say, you're the guys who broke it.
Yeah, and we have to also remember that a lot of the people who have been affected disproportionately have been people of color, poor people. And this is the majority of people in our society. And so to now wave a flag and wave pom-poms like you've done a whole lot to help with this coronavirus pandemic is false. Because there are people who know that we've been looking for leadership and there's been a lack of leadership on this issue from a national level, and that we've had to turn to our governors. And they've taken a lot of heat making the hard decisions that someone else was unwilling to make.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. What were those tough decisions that the administration did not make?
Well, I think one of the things that the administration didn't do was, one, take it seriously enough. Didn't take it seriously enough. Also, didn't even listen to the, to the healthcare professionals like Dr. Fauci, who was turned into what I believe was an enemy when people were looking to him for advice because they were so desperate. Looking to the science is the most important. Saying things like, oh, it'll just go away, it's not true. We have to be honest with the American people about the pandemic, about its causes, and about what we all need to do to prevent it. Wearing a mask was so huge So huge, because we know that it lessens the transmission of the disease. But we had people in leadership who were even unwilling to do that simple thing, leading by example. That's huge.
Well, let me counter that though, Amanda, and say that early on, Dr. Fauci said, when asked about wearing a mask, said, "Oh, I'm not quite sure that that's necessary." And then he doubled back down and said, "Well, I said that because we didn't have enough masks at the time." So you started, as everybody wants to say, Dr. Fauci is the prime person to go to on this, and I do believe he probably is. You did get a double-edged sword with him on that particular subject.
And we did. And we had a lot of people, because I think that because this was new and because there were a lot of unknowns, that we had people saying many different things. However, once they became more accustomed to the data became more reliable. I think that the information then became more reliable and more consistent. And yes, we did have someone in an administration who was saying one thing and then turned course later. But I have no problem with someone turning course when they're recognizing, hey, I was wrong. Or this is why I said the thing that was incorrect. Here's what we need to do now, and here's why.
I want to ask you and Jim, will you both watch the president tonight?
Yes. Oh, I definitely will. I mean, the chairman in me, first of all, the American in me has to watch. And as an American, you want to see the man be respectable for the sake of the country and the international stage that he stands on. When he makes these gaffes, it's an embarrassment for all of us. So in that respect, yes, don't embarrass the country. That doesn't mean that, that doesn't mean that, I would ever vote for him. So I think he's been a failure. The chairman in me wants to study the film. What did he do that the Democrats need to be worried about? What did he say that I thought the Democrats can exploit? So yes, I mean, I study it like as a political analyst would. What was good for him? What was good for his his platform, and what could be worked to the advantage of the opposition?
I'll be honest, Stacy, I may not have time to watch it. There are a lot of things going on in this country. We have decisions being made about whether or not children should return to school, and I have 2 school-age children trying to come up with ideas about how they're going to be educated and taken care of throughout the day. The coronavirus pandemic is real, has affected people I know. And then we also have the situation in Kenosha, Wisconsin. We also had a situation here in Bedford, Pennsylvania, where people of color have again been shot at, attacked. And I'm talking to people constantly through the day who are asking, what's going on? What do we do? How do we turn the tide? We feel like our lives are at stake. And so because of these more weighty and heavy issues, they have to do with life and death in a lot of instances. I'm not sure if I will realistically have the opportunity to watch the president's speech tonight.
Governor, Keith raised a point that I want to bring up with you, and that is that he feels the President Trump tonight will be more presidential. We saw some of that last night, as a matter of fact, at the end of the vice president's speech, when the president made a surprise appearance at Fort McHenry and never said a word, never took to the microphone. Do you see a change coming tonight, perhaps, as well as Keith?
I hope so. I truly hope so, because to date, I don't think that the president has fully grasped the role of president and the ability to lead, as Amanda said before, by his actions rather than his words. When you are the chief executive, whether it's the governor or the mayor or the president of the United States, you are expected to fill a role and have a certain appearance. And I noticed it last night when he got on stage next to Mike Pence, and I think Mike gave a good speech for the time. But I was surprised that he did not say anything. And those of us who've been in politics, we understand every time you can get in front of a camera, especially as the incumbent, it's called earned media. You're not paying for it. And I think that's one of the reasons he was on every night as compared to Vice President Biden, who was only on, I think, the one night. And I think you're going to see him in those situations again. He can go around the country campaigning like that. But if we could think of his behavior changing somewhat, which I'm not going to hold my breath for, it could change some dynamics in this race. I'd like to go back to the COVID discussion for just a moment. And everybody's pointing fingers, frankly, at everybody. I would remind everybody that when the president shut down planes coming in from China, the Democrats, Nancy Pelosi, they went after him for being xenophobic. And now they go after him for not wearing a mask. And I'm not defending him, but this is a disease that we're all still learning about. How is it going? I teach at Duquesne Law School. I'm in there right now. I'll be in there this afternoon teaching in a very different situation and online. So we have to be adaptable. It's not unusual in politics to point the finger at the other guy. That's going to happen. We accept that. But, you know, it's impossible to take COVID out of the campaign. But really, it was a completely different issue that caught everybody by surprise. I'm not sure that if Hillary Clinton had been there, that they would have reacted much differently. Her behavior may have been different, but the reaction, everybody was adjusting to, you know, what is this, how this is going, not just here in the United States, but around the world.
And I agree with you, Gov. And, you know, I think this issue cuts both ways, and you have to be careful with this issue. I respectfully disagree with my Democratic colleagues. I believe that the president provided leadership. I believe he provided the necessary resources from the top to the states as best as he could to make sure that people got the necessary equipment, including respirators, to take care of the people most critically ill. But, you know, a lot of the blame in my mind is going to a lot of these Democratic governors and the inconsistency of the message to their citizens. I'm frustrated, of course, in Pennsylvania. I'm very frustrated. You know, the demands that they're making on different groups are just, it doesn't make sense to me. I know that the governor, and I would say I agree with them, have a concern with sports moving forward, but they're going to move forward with sports anyhow. As far as I'm concerned, if the governor is going to dictate, even though the science says mask, 6 feet apart, wash your hands, and if we do that, we should be left alone. And I've said month after month, we should just allow these businesses to operate under those constraints. We understand how it spreads. Thank God the death rate has been dramatically declined, but it's still spreading. But it doesn't spread if we do those things. And if you do those things, you should allow businesses to operate. And we're still at a 25% capacity. 75% of their seats are empty in restaurants. They're suffering. But yet, now there's not going to be a demand or an edict from Harrisburg to say stop sports. We're going to let a dozen young men who's sweating and aggressively in tackling in a football game. How does that possibly make sense? If I'm a business owner, barely paying my bills, losing money, taking money out of my life savings, and the government is in my face and telling me how to run my restaurant, but we're not protecting the most vulnerable among us. If you're going to tell local restaurants and businesses how they operate, then you have to take it all the way. You have to tell us that sports is a health hazard, and you cannot operate sports this fall.
Oh, there'll be plenty of blame to go around. Heavy is the head that wears the crown when you're in leadership, and everyone has to be ready to take their lumps. But when we're talking about the president, remember, he was the one who was saying, oh, this will just go away. That's how lightly he was treating this. And many people looking at that leadership, if that's what you want to call it, we're thinking, oh, we'll be okay. We can go around without masks. And if anyone remembers at all the story of Mark Urquiza, his family was all over television last week talking about how he heard that and proceeded to go out and hang out for his birthday and suffered dearly and deadly consequences because of it. I don't think Governor Wolf is saying that this is something that should not be taken seriously. It will just go away.
I don't know how you're going to analyze this when it's over, but if we just take a look at Pennsylvania, there are a lot of people that are upset with the treatment they have received, as Keith has pointed out, and the inconsistencies coming out of the Wolf administration. One of the most important ones is you can't have the sports, you have to limit it to a certain number of sizes, but they allowed the Carlisle Auto Show with 25,000 people to go on. Are they going to be mad at Trump, or are they going to be mad at Wolf and the Democrats for that? And are those people in the middle that are going to make up their mind and say, this is what happened, and it happened here in Pennsylvania. And I'm sure there may be instances in other states, but I'm looking at Pennsylvania as a swing state. How does the governor's treatment of COVID affect the national election when it comes to the Electoral College?
Absolutely. Some of these polls I see, Governor, I would have thought that with Joe Biden's residency here, with the dissatisfaction in the Democratic Party, and the margin between Democrats and Republicans in Pennsylvania, which is not, it's big. I would think the numbers would be more to Joe Biden's advantage. There's not as much of a spread when you average the polls in this state for Mr. Biden at this point as I thought there would be. Why is that? Does it have to do with Governor Wolf and making these inconsistent decisions? Is it affecting the T? Is it affecting Democrats on the 79 corridor where Donald Trump won Pennsylvania? It remains to be seen. Governor Wolf needs to be consistent. Governor Wolf needs to explain why some law firms were open while others were not. He needs to explain why some businesses, furniture business, for example, was allowed to open while others were not. And the legislature, bipartisan, is right to have those questions answered. So will the Republicans attempt to use his messaging and how he's handled this against him? I would point out to the viewers, however, that he is still polling remarkably high, 70% plus, in how he's handled Corona in Pennsylvania. So to the extent that's giving him tails and Joe Biden inverted tails, reverse tails, the governor helping Joe Biden, I think the margin should be higher. At the end of the day, and we talk about what needs to be done for the Rust Belt states, the moderate Democrats in Western Pennsylvania, in Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, the places where Hillary Clinton didn't do the work, where Hillary Clinton lost, Donald Trump didn't win. Those folks wanted somebody new. They were misdirected, and many of them feel as if it was a mistake to vote for Donald Trump. Can the Democratic Party identify those voters they lost and get them back in the column with a steady hand, someone they're comfortable with, in Joe Biden? Or can Donald Trump, in the next 60 days, remind them that they were for him for a reason, what those reasons were, and why they need to stick with him for another 4 years?
Let me reiterate, Stacy. I think people are at the point where they want government to stop helping us. We understand this is a real disease. Thank God that the death rate is now well under 1%. And we understand that the elderly are at risk. We understand people with pre-existing conditions are at risk. We understand the disease. We understand that 99+ percent may encounter this disease and they will survive it. It'll be like a bad flu. But at this point, they need to get back into their lives. They will always continue to wear masks. They get it. They understand about washing it. They understand about distancing. But they have concerns over the depression. They have their concerns over bankruptcy, nutrition for children, child abuse, spousal abuse, all the various ancillary things that are happening that are destroying this economy, that are destroying the emotions and the opportunity spirit of America. They're basically saying enough. We understand who we have to protect. We understand how not to spread it. Now let us go and try to operate our lives. And every day that doesn't happen, I can tell you the pressure is building. People are getting fed up. They understand that it's a pandemic. They understand they have to respect it. But at some point, the government has to stop dictating how we conduct ourselves day to day.
But at the same time, Keith, I think we have to remember that there are people who aren't doing some of those very things that you talked about that are crucial to help stop the spread of this disease. There are some people who won't do the social distancing. There are groups of people who won't do the mask. So I don't know how we get to stemming this whole thing if we don't have people willing to do the necessary. Enforcement. But then that's government back in our lives, Keith. That's still going to be government.
There's laws that govern, and the world operates by, the civil societies operate by laws and rules. And we have to, if people violate that. I know the businesses I go in, if I wasn't wearing a mask, I'd be asked to leave. They're following the rules. They're calling people out. And then if it is a business that welcomes those people, I have to decide as a family that we're not going to support those businesses. If I think I am vulnerable or my loved ones are vulnerable, I will go to those businesses and likely will report those businesses. Together we have to enforce, but stop punishing law-abiding citizens that are trying to survive.
But you need government. You need government to do that. You need enforcement. I do think Allegheny County did the right thing by doing this task force, but they only have 10 people. They should talk to the governor about lifting that 25%, get it a little higher, and then triple the number of people that they have out there and enforce. If the XYZ bar on the other side of the street doesn't give a darn, and it's a COVID Petri dish in there, they should be shut down. The guy across the street, Keith, and we talked about this, who's in compliance with those rules and enforcing masks, he should not be made to suffer. But you need government to enforce those rules.
All right, Governor, I'm going to push it back on you.
Oh my God, I completely agree with Jim Byrne. Just so you know.
Cats and dogs are falling out of the sky, Keith.
Yeah. Governor, I want to go back to you. You just heard this discussion about enforcement. If you were still in that chair in Harrisburg, can you do that? Can you automatically start snapping your fingers and say, okay, we're going to have an enforcement crew to go out and do this sort of thing?
Good question. Well, first off, we got to go back to the basis for this, and it's been inconsistent. And I think again, the communication from the very beginning was inconsistent. We need to get out there and explain it to the people. Once people know what the rules are and the rules are somewhat reasonable, again, I always talk about balance between protecting and allowing businesses to at least operate. But I think, we put money in for a lot of different projects. It would not be hard to get additional money to get to the counties to help go out and do some enforcement, hire people, train them, and they really don't have to write the tickets or something. We just need witnesses to go in, come back out, report to the LCB or report to the local police officers that this is what's going on. Frankly, they could go in this day and age, they can bring their little cell phone and video and take a picture of everything going on, take it back to somebody. So you're asking me that question off the top of my head. Could there have been more money put into enforcement? Sure. But again, it goes county by county. And, I know Richard Fitzgerald very well. 10 people. There are a lot of people in county government that are not going into their offices. They are at home. Take them and send them into the field. Put the masks on them. Let them go see what's going on. I just think that would have been one way. I'm not criticizing Rich at this point in time because it's easy to do this Monday morning quarterbacking. But I go back to the very beginning. This was, from the beginning, should have been at Pima and thought out a whole piece together instead of turning everything over to the Department of Health in an area other than the science, an area that they have no experience dealing with emergencies. And I think that set the tone here in Pennsylvania.
All right, I want to move back to the conventions for just a second. We only have about 5 or so minutes left to go here. Last week we said, I think it was you, Governor, you even said that this may be the way conventions are going to be held from this point on. After looking at the Democratic convention and what you've seen now with the Republican convention, do you think that's the case? Do you think this is where politics is headed down the road as far as national conventions go?
Well, I guess I'd ask you this, and I haven't looked to see what the Nielsen ratings were.
Everybody's down at both parties.
Everybody's down.
Absolutely. So there's a clear loss of interest in them in this way. I'm not so sure they would be higher if it was a traditional convention. So I would think that the RNC and the DNC is going to sit down after the election and say, where are we going in the future? It's changing. The young people are changing. We have social media changing it. I think, could it be a relic of the past? Yeah, that's a possibility.
I agree. I was state chairman in 2012 when we did the convention in Charlotte. It was a logistical nightmare for Pennsylvania. The way the DNC had the states drawing numbers and, drawing straws as to who gets first dibs on which hotels. We had 3 hotels scattered all over the place, the logistics, the cost, the overhead. And that was just one state. We had to get everybody through the buses and the transportation down on time. Then they're screaming for their credentials. Where's my credential? That's not the credential I'm supposed to have. I don't think Kevin Washoe, our executive director, myself, or Fatty, or the whole team, I don't think any of us slept for a week. And that's just one state. For what purpose? I mean, I get it. You're getting everybody riled up, but the folks that are in that room are riled up anyway. And I think you're right, guys. if these were live or in person as they've been in the past in 2020, I think the Nielsen's or the ratings still would have been down. There needs to be a new way to do this. Quite frankly, those folks need to be charged up. They don't need to be in a room with all that time and all that money. If they're not motivated, something's wrong with them. It's time to rethink how we do these conventions.
Well, I'm a guy that likes the crazy hats and the buttons and the whole and the streamers and the signs waving, the handmade signs, and the whole nervousness that people have walking off onto a big stage, even if they are usually great speakers. You think, is this moment in time going to be a challenge for them? I remember how nervous I was in 1992 when the last substantial speech of Ronald Reagan's life was to deliver a speech at the convention 4 years after leaving the presidency. He hit it out of the park, but I can tell you I bit my bottom lip for 28 minutes. I mean, that I didn't want him to have that moment because I knew that would be the last time we saw him on that stage. But the fact is a fact. If we can return to conventions next year, 4 years from now, I have a sense if public health will allow us to do it, I can't believe that we're not going to go back there, largely because of the drop-off of viewership. I think it is important for a certain portion of America within a couple months of a election to see the policy and the presentation, the last best effort to sell themselves to the American people. And when the numbers are down north of 40%, it's not working. We have to at least explore the opportunity to take it back to the rich history that dates back 50 or 60 years.
You know, we also have to look at the politics of the political parties, right? We know that there are committee members, that there are people who've been on the RNC, DNC for years and years and years. And to tell them that they're not going to a convention, who want to have that conversation with them? I don't know. But also what it also does for an economy. In Charlotte, I was in Charlotte. I know exactly what Jim's talking about, the logistical nightmare. However, you know, it was a boon. Us being there was a boon to that economy. And so there are a lot of politics behind this. I'm with Keith. I don't think we're going to be doing this virtually next time. I think we're going to be in a physical location if health department permits.
2008, good points. Maybe there can be a hybrid or something, you know, but there has to be some type of a change to it. Let's adapt with the times. We're remembering the traditions. Two things I've remembered, you know, to Keith and Amanda's point. Ted Kennedy's speech in 2008 in Denver, passing the torch shall be passed. The last time he was on a stage to Barack Obama, and personally having some fun aggravating Governor Rendell by taking my time to hand in my ballot was a lot of fun. So.
I would have to say though that if we don't have them, these speeches by the vice presidents and the presidents accepting just has lost something because there's no emotion. There's no true crowd there. Last night with Vice President Pence, there was a crowd there. They were applauding. But for those of us who've been involved in politics, we're used to every other word. Yeah, stand up 4 more years, whatever. Mm-hmm. If that goes away, some steam of politics goes away too. Steam.
I agree.
So, as I said, I think it'll be considered. I think what they may consider is shortening it by a day or two. It doesn't need to be 4 days. There's another cost factor involved that we know about, and that's the cost of security to surround those buildings, because that's considered a national event by the Secret Service and Homeland Security, equal to the Masters and the Super Bowl and the NBA and the NCAA. Huge cost to that event. Great for the economy, and I remember the Minnesota event for us in Keith. What was that? 8, I think.
2008.
Yeah, I believe. We were in a hotel 45 miles away, and had to take buses in and out. So there's an inconvenience aspect to it also. It's fun.
It's not lost on me that the governor says sometimes government is as important as sports when he was making his analogy, which is, you know, that's the world we live in. Sometimes it's as important as the Masters and NBA. Yeah, I hope so.
All right. We are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us again on Around the Table. And I want to say to all of you, you did a great job as you always do. And we'll see you again next week. Thanks.
Have a great week. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye-bye.
Right.